For thousands of years, the Great Pyramids have just been awe-inspiring. They're one of those things you can't help but stare at. But the story of how they were built, the one we all learned in school, well, it might just be one of history's biggest misunderstandings. So today, let's unmask the truth about the real pyramid builders. When you picture the pyramids, what do you see? I bet it's something epic, right? Thousands of people dragging these impossibly huge stones under a blazing hot sun. It's a really powerful image, and it's been burned into our collective imagination for centuries. And at the heart of that whole epic story is one really brutal idea, that the pyramids were built by countless slaves, forced into this backbreaking labor by the crack of a whip. It's the version Hollywood loves to show us, and honestly, it's the one most of us have always believed. But what if that entire story is just flat out wrong? What if it's a complete myth? Because new archaeological evidence is completely rewriting history, and it reveals a truth that's honestly way more complex and frankly a whole lot more impressive. Okay, so if the ancient Egyptians weren't telling this slave story, who was? Well, that whole idea was really made popular centuries later by Greek historians. But today, archaeologists are digging up the real story, not from old secondhand texts, but from the ground itself. So let's just put these two stories side by side. You've got the myth, right? Forced labor, driven by coercion, all coming from outside accounts. And then you have the reality, which we've pieced together from actual Egyptian records. And that shows a paid, highly organized workforce. This isn't just some tiny little detail. This completely shifts our entire understanding from a story about oppression to a story about incredible project management. So let's get into the proof. What did archaeologists actually find there at Giza? Well, it turns out the builders themselves left behind this incredible trail of clues that just completely demolishes the old slave myth and finally lets them tell their own story. So check this out. First off, workers were buried in tombs of honor, right near the pharaohs they worked for. Slaves would never have gotten that kind of respect. And their skeletons? They show healed fractures, which proves they were getting expert medical care. This was not a disposable workforce. And then there's the engineering itself. The precision is just mind-blowing. That kind of craftsmanship takes skilled, motivated professionals, not people being forced to work. This really hits the nail on the head. The way these workers were buried is such a critical piece of the puzzle. See, in ancient Egypt, your burial was everything. To be buried with honor, with supplies for the afterlife, that meant you were a respected member of society. That alone tells us these people were valued citizens, not property. Okay, so if they weren't slaves, who in the world were they? Well, thanks to the excavation of the villages they lived in, we actually have a remarkably clear picture of what their daily lives were like. We can finally move beyond what they weren't and start talking about who they were. And this wasn't just a place they crashed at night. It was a fully supported city built specifically for the workers. Archaeologists have found these organized housing blocks, industrial-sized bakeries that could churn out enough bread to feed thousands every single day, and even on-site medical clinics. This was an enormous state-sponsored operation, and it was all focused on supporting a valuable workforce. So who were these guys? Well, for a lot of them, this was actually a seasonal job. They were farmers. And during the Nile's annual flood, when their fields were totally underwater and they couldn't work, they'd contribute to the pyramid project. You can kind of think of it like a form of national service. They weren't dragged there in chains. They were compensated with food and shelter, and they earned the honor of building something timeless for their entire kingdom. The bones, the bakeries, they tell a really powerful story. But for decades, there was still one thing missing. A voice from the builders themselves. What if we could actually read their own words? Then in 2013, an absolutely incredible discovery gave us just that. Archaeologists found the smoking gun. This is it, the Papyrus of Mirror, the oldest papyrus ever discovered. And get this, it's not some sacred religious text. It's a work diary. It is the personal logbook of a mid-level manager named Mir, and it details the day-to-day operations of his crew of 40 elite workers as they were helping to finish the Great Pyramid. So what's in it? It's a detailed record of moving limestone blocks, their work schedules, and, crucially, the rations they were paid as wages. Let me be clear. This isn't an interpretation. It's basically a 4,600-year-old timesheet, and it gives us undeniable, written proof of a state-run paid labor system. Case closed.
So all of this evidence, it forces us to completely reframe our entire understanding. This isn't just about correcting a little historical detail, it's about seeing the whole society of ancient Egypt in a new and much more sophisticated light. So let's just erase that old image of a beaten-down slave and replace it with this one, a skilled professional, an Egyptian citizen, somebody who had advanced knowledge of engineering, who worked as part of a highly organized team, and who was a proud contributor to one of the greatest national projects in all of history. When you get right down to it, the Great Pyramid isn't a monument to oppression. It's a testament to human ingenuity, to incredible organization, and to the power of a society that has a shared purpose. It was built by architects and engineers, by craftsmen and citizens, not by slaves. You know, it took over 2,000 years for this truth to finally come to light. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. If the entire world could be so wrong for so long about something as famous as the pyramids, what other facts from history are just myths waiting to be broken?